Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I am so happy to have you guys join us on our first of several upcoming webinars. We have partnered with NCAT, and we're excited to share some really important information that we think will really benefit you on your land and improve the ecosystem function. So we have Kara Kroeger and Colin Mitchell, and they are experts in sustainable agricultural operations. And this webinar is going to be an introduction just to some basic principles. We'll be covering soil health principles, soil and water infiltration testing, erosion mitigation and restoration, adaptive grazing management, pasture cropping, cedar clearing remediation, and tree planting and native seeding. So we have a lot of really good information. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Colin. And I think we might at some point have a survey for you guys to fill out just to see what needs you might have on your land, and then also questions as well. So I'll turn it over to Colin.
All right, hi everyone, and welcome to the NCAT webinar, Economically Viable Management Tools to Improve Land Health. My name is Colin Mitchell, and I'm joined by my colleague Kara Kroeger, and we're both sustainable agriculture specialists at the National Center for Appropriate Technology, which is kind of a mouthful, so most people know us as NCAT. We both work out of our Southwest office in San Antonio, so we're here in Central Texas just like the rest of y'all. NCAT is a nationwide nonprofit organization with 5 regional headquarters across the country. We work on issues pertaining to sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and sustainable communities. I want to give a special thanks to NCAT, the City of San Antonio, and the Edwards Aquifer Authority, and our IT staff at NCAT for making this all possible. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on NCAT's ASHRA webpage. ASHRA, our Sustainable Agriculture Program, is funded through a cooperative agreement with the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service, and we're grateful for their support as well. ASHRA offers a wide range of services to sustainable ag producers, including publications, toll-free helplines, and webinars. You can check it out for yourself after the webinar on the ASHRA website, www.ashra.ncat.org. So as far as introductions, I have a bachelor's in government and a minor in geography of the environment from the University of Texas at Austin. I am a former Permaculture Research Institute of Australia project management intern and a Permaculture Research Institute certified permaculture designer. So during that internship, I did some version of every management strategy we're about to talk about with my own 2 hands every day for 10 months, living in a tent out in the Australian bush. I spent the years after completing the internship managing sustainable agriculture and development projects across Central Texas and the United States. With NCAT, I currently work on more than 7 projects related to soil health, local food, agroforestry, and sustainable crop and livestock production. I help make our work accessible to folks like yourselves through our ASHRA program by creating educational videos, publications, webinars like this one, workshops, conference presentations, and providing technical assistance. So my colleague Kara, a little about her background, she became a certified herbalist at the Rocky Mountain Center of Botanical Medicine in 1999 and a certified nutritionist through the American Health Sciences University in 2003. Kara also began training as a chef in 2009 and has a private chef and catering business ever since. Kara continues to passionately study agriculture and food. She received a Bachelor of General Agriculture in May of 2018 from Texas State University and currently works to spread knowledge about sustainable agriculture to local food producers through her work at NCAT. Kara is the lead on the Soil for Water initiative, which she will discuss here in a minute. So before we really get started, there are a couple of things I like to point out. First of all, you'll see a field on the screen where you can write questions during the webinar. We will be collecting the questions and we will answer a number of them towards the end of the webinar. Don't be shy about asking a question. If you ask a question and it isn't answered during the webinar, we will answer it and all the questions we get via email in the days to come. In fact, if you think of questions after the webinar or about any sustainable agriculture question, look for the Ask an Ag Expert contact information on the actual website. Also, at the end of the webinar, you'll receive a short survey. Please take a few minutes to answer the survey. It helps us make future webinars as effective and helpful as we can. Now I'm going to pass it off to Kara, and she'll tell you more about our Soil for Water initiative.
Hello, I'm glad to be here today. Thank you all for joining us. I want to start by telling you a little bit about the Soil for Water project. And this is an initiative to catch and hold more rainwater in the soil. And the Edwards Aquifer Authority and the City of San Antonio learned about this program and asked us to help help educate the easement owners on ways that they can improve the capacity to hold more water in the soil with easement owners. So our initiative started in 2015, and it began after the 2011 drought that caused a lot of devastation to Texas landowners, especially those that had cattle and lost a lot of livestock or had to sell it at low prices. And so we were approached by Peggy Sechrist, who is a partner with the Soil for Water project, who is a holistic management certified educator. And she asked us to partner with her on the Soil for Water project and help educate landowners on how to catch and hold more rainwater in the soil. So basically, we are a group of people who are working to create a critical mass of landowners applying regenerative ag practices or management practices that can improve soil health and improve the water cycles as well. We act as a facilitator, networker, and educational resource to a large group of folks in the Hill Country, but we're expanding beyond that into other parts of Texas, and later in the year, maybe into other states as well. So we're a growing project. Our soilforwater.org is our website, and there's a lot of great information on there. We have research trials set up on 15 different ranches in Texas where we're monitoring once a year, doing soil testing, as well as looking at percent cover data of the ground and species identification. And that's looking at ways that different management practices are improving soil health and water infiltration into the ground. So please check out the website and learn a little bit more about our program there. Our resources page on the website has a lot of great management guides, as well as podcasts and different things like that I suggest you browse. And we also have an events page that tells you about other events and webinars that we have coming up as well. So please stay tuned into that. I want to start our talk today discussing a little bit about economic viability. Of course, we all know that land use changes don't come without a cost, and land is always in need of maintenance, and we always want to enhance productivity to improve any type of operation that we have going on the land. So obviously there's a number of things that we have to think about when we're making management decisions, and that can be technology. Do we need more technology in order to make that change? Policy issues, the socioeconomics, does it make it equitable for more people? And then environmental considerations. And these are all very important things to think about when you're making management decisions. One of the best ways to begin to make decisions on your land and have them be more economically viable is to really define who your management team is up front. So think about everybody that has a stake in the land and pull all of those people together and sit down and create a plan on how y'all are going to make decisions. A lot of times we can spend more money being unorganized in the long run. And so if you get organized from the beginning and you decide as a group what is really important to each person in the group, and then choose to make decisions on how you will take each of those people's considerations into account and look at the financial viability of all of those different options before you begin making management decisions. So I wanted to mention Holistic Management International. They are an organization that we work closely with on the Soil for Water project, and they have some great framework for decision making. So I highly recommend looking at their website And also we have a webinar coming up on May 8th, which will be introducing the Regenerative Agriculture Mentorship Program that HMI will be putting on in Central Texas and Northeast Texas. And it's a group of small landowners who will come together for business coaching for a whole year, looking at land management on their properties and looking at their operations in depth. So keep your eye out for that. If you're interested in that, please email me and I can give you some information on that. But overall, we want each of our management decisions to generate an acceptable rate of return, especially when we're looking at an agriculture operation. So I highly recommend that you take this decision-making framework and use that as a basis to start with. And if you need more help with the different types of options out there for good decision-making, please be in touch and we can help in that arena. I want to talk a little bit about the 5 soil health principles. This is what we base the Soil for Water project on. And these 5 principles alone can make huge impacts on your land. So the first one, keep the soil covered, is very helpful for preventing erosion. It also controls temperature of the soil when it is covered, and it will keep it cool in the summer and keep it warm in the winter, and decrease evaporation and hold more water in the soil, which can improve the ability for plants to grow. The biodiversity increase is very important, and we want to increase biodiversity both above ground and below ground. And the below ground biodiversity is the microbiology, and the above ground is the plant species as well as the different animal and insect species that live above ground. When we have lots of biodiversity in our above and below ground environments, we have better soil health. And that soil can then give nutrients back to the plants more efficiently. And when the plant gives the carbon exudates back to the microbiology below the soil, it increases the soil sponge and it increases the ability for soil to hold more water, which is very important when you're trying to improve land health and ecosystem function. We also want to minimize disturbance, and disturbance can be caused by equipment, chemicals, and precipitation. So if we're using implements and driving over the pasture a lot, that can be a disturbance, as well as using fertilizers and herbicides that can kill off the microbiology through different mechanisms and disturb the overall function of soil in general. Precipitation events are also an issue, so we want to make sure that when rain happens, the soil is covered and there's less disturbance happening from precipitation events. Integrating livestock can be very beneficial for health of soil because it helps to recycle residues. When plants grow and then senesce, the residue of that plant tends to build up above ground. And when livestock go through a pasture, they trample that residue down, or they consume it and then through their dunging excrete it out where it becomes more close to the soil surface. And then at that point, those residues can be used by the soil microbiology as a fuel source, and that can increase soil organic matter, which again improves the soil sponge to absorb more water. Additionally, the ruminant gut has a lot of microbes in it itself, and through their urination and dunging, those microbes are introduced to the soil, which also increases the diversity of the below ground microbiome and is very beneficial for soil health too. Continual live plant root is important because it is those roots that feed the microbiology by way of photosynthesis that happens in the plant. Carbon is taken in, that's turned into sugars in the plant, and then that is excreted through the roots of the plant to the microbiology in exchange for nutrients to the plant. And it's that cycle that allows for plant growth to happen and soil health to improve as well. So those are the main focuses of, those are the main 5 soil health principles. And if you incorporate one or all 5 of these, you're going to see improvement in your land in general. So I want to talk about erosion mitigation next. The causes are many, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, and it's really hard to predict how changes to land can contribute to erosion. Oftentimes we may put a road in and we don't realize that it's going to cause a problem to happen in a pasture along the side of that road where a head cut begins, and then you start getting erosion into different areas of the pasture. So there's a lot of ways that we can improve erosion, and the benefits can be multifold. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those things here in a second. But ultimately, our main goals in order to mitigate erosion is to slow water down when we do get precipitation events and direct it to specific areas. And by way of doing that, we can help improve the soil sponge that will hold more water when we do get those precipitation events. So by way of putting that water in specific areas, we can support vegetation and plant succession. So we want vegetation to stick around in our pastures during the growing seasons, both the cool season and the warm season. We want those plants to stick around and have longer lives than if we're not supporting then if that water is running off, we don't get that plant succession in the same way. Another benefit of reducing erosion is that we reduce non-point source pollution. So when we are holding water in the soil, it is cleansing the water as it slowly seeps into groundwater, other surface areas, and other surface water areas, and it reduces pollution into those areas as well. And when we improve the soil sponge, we definitely recharge our groundwater. So, and that's really important for Edwards Aquifer easements that so many of the people who are on the call today. Well, oftentimes these mitigation strategies can use low cost and locally available materials that are found on your very own property. And you can see some of these things here. We have in the top left picture, people took some of the cedar trunks that were cut down on their property, and you put those cedar trunks along your property on contour. So where there's slopes that happen in the pasture, you put them in certain areas on contour, and as water comes down the pasture, it will be slowed down by those cedar stumps, and sediment will begin to build up behind that over time and increase the amount of soil organic matter happening in that area. On the top right, we have something called a media luna, which is a way to slow down water. So if you do notice a little bit of a culvert beginning in a pasture, a little bit of a stream forming that is going to cut through the pasture, you can create one of these media lunas to spread out that water and prevent it from degrading even further and eroding things even further. And as you can see in the bottom left, it's a little bit challenging to see, but this is what we call a zuni bowl. And this is where a head cut did begin in a pasture, and there was some deep erosion going on. And you can take rocks and put those up against the wall of that head cut and prevent further erosion. The branches that you see on top of that are simply for keeping the cattle off of it. The picture on the bottom right is a way to allow water to flow from one area of a pasture into another. You can't see it, but on the right and left of that little downslope, rock downslope is a berm. So it prevents the water from going anywhere but down that little area, and then that prevents erosion as well. So as you can see, there's a number of different ways that you can do this on your land. Another way to prevent erosion is through the 5 soil health principles. And then if you have a riparian area on your land where a waterway is, our Remarkable Riparian Guidebook is a great resource as well to see how to improve riparian function. And now Colin is going to talk a little bit about swales, berms, and keyline design.
All right, so swales, berms, and keyline design are different on-farm strategies to manage how water moves across your farm or ranch. Swales are essentially an on-contour ditch, or a ditch within a 1% to 2% slope that holds a few days worth of water in it when it rains. You can see this example on the top left picture, and on the top right one as well, is a swale that doesn't have any water in it. A swale is typically accompanied by a downslope berm with trees or other perennials planted on the berm. The swale-berm combo slows, sinks, and spreads rainwater across the landscape. It keeps water on your property longer than if the water moved across your land naturally and provides an extra pulse of water to what you planted on the berm. This mitigates drought and helps with the resiliency of the trees planted on the berm. By slowing and spreading this water, you're also reducing erosion on your property. Think of them as speed bumps for water, essentially. So Keyline design is a method of whole farm planning that can use swales and berms and subsoil ripping. On the bottom left image, you see an example of a Keyline designed farm. The central idea behind Keyline water management is to consciously slow, sink, and spread rainwater by relieving compaction, opening up pore space and compacted soil, and distributing excess water towards drier parts of the landscape. This has an effect of buffering the natural concentration of water towards valleys and reducing flooding. By maximizing the flow of water to drier ridges using precise plow lines or swales that fall slightly off contour, we can infiltrate it across the broadest possible area. In this respect, Keyline strategies can be both a flood and drought mitigation strategy. Keyline water management has the potential to enhance the water efficiency of any production system. So these systems can be created by hand, which I have done lots of, or with backhoes, excavators, or bulldozers. While we at NCAT cannot design your farm or ranch in this manner or install them ourselves, just kind of out of a purview of what we can do, we can educate you on these systems and link you up with designers we know in Texas, or we can provide you feedback on your design. So another management consideration for improving the health of your land is how you manage cedar trees. Clear cutting or thinning cedars and burning or removal of trees leaves bare grounds and increases erosion. Tree roots create a mat that essentially holds your soil in place. The best approach to reduce the negative impact on your soils would be to have the trees mulched and have that mulch be put where the removal was. Leaving wood chips on the ground reduces erosion, slows water, covers the soil, and provides a food source for your soil organisms. The easiest and most cost-effective way to clear cut or thin and mulch is the hydro-axe. The hydro-axe can be attached to a bobcat or a large bulldozer and mulches that tree in place. The equipment is more expensive for you or for the tree removal company, but it is less steps and labor hours than other options. Depending on your goals, though, this could cause issues because it leaves stumps in place. So if you're building, like a building there, you'll want to grub. And grubbing is basically picking up the tree and pulling it out, so you get some roots and there's no more stump there. So another option, if you don't want the stubs, is to grub, and then you can either have them placed in a tub grinder, which is basically a big giant mulcher, or pile them up and take a hydro-axe to the pile and then put that mulch in the spot where you moved the tree. And now I'm going to pass it back off to Kara, and she's going to explain some different grazing strategies for y'all.
Okay, so livestock can be a really potent tool for regenerating the land. It can also be a huge cause of degradation. And obviously there's a lot of different ways to graze cattle. We have continuous grazing, which is just open pasture, leaving cattle free to roam without any direction. And they generally tend to stick to certain areas, especially the ones that are close to water. And so it can really degrade the land, and they can just eat plants down to a nub, which is not healthy. And then there's cross fencing, where you maybe create a few different pastures and you'll move the cattle throughout those pastures, maybe letting them visit it one time a year, but there's no particular duration that you leave them in there. Then you have rotational grazing, which is maybe cutting those pastures, those cross-fenced pastures, with polyelectric wire, and being a little bit more specific about when you let the cattle into certain areas and how long they stay. And then with adaptive grazing, it's kind of the maximum, the maximum management in terms of really watching your pasture, thinking about how much rain you've had that year, how much forage you may have left for the remainder of the year, and moving the cattle very specifically based on how you're watching the land during that time. And we call that adaptive because we're constantly changing it up as you move through the different seasons. So just to begin with, I want to talk a little bit about this picture that we have on the slide. And it is pertaining to the amount of a plant that the cattle eat. So if cattle eat 90% of the above ground parts of a plant, then 100% of the roots will stop growing for 17 days. If they eat 70% of that above ground plant, 50% of the roots stop growing for 17 days. And at 50% use of the plant, the roots will not stop growing at all. And ultimately, to improve the soil sponge, we really want to keep a lot of roots in the ground because that is what is putting soil organic matter into the ground very easily by way of keeping the microbes alive. So with adaptive grazing, we really hone in on not consuming more than 50% of the plants as cattle go in, or any other type of livestock go into the pasture. So overall, you can increase carrying capacity with adaptive grazing, and a lot of people enjoy that benefit because it is going to improve your bottom line from an operational income perspective. So overall, many cattle find, you will find that livestock have improved health when they are being grazed adaptively as well because of the biodiversity of the plants that they're eating. When you do adaptive grazing, oftentimes you don't have monocultures in the same capacity. You let your pasture grow and you create a lot of biodiversity, and cattle can utilize that biodiversity to improve their health as well. As they move through the pasture and they are putting down manure and urinating on the pasture, they are also giving benefit, as I talked about earlier, to the soil microbiome, and also offering nitrogen to the pasture by way of the urination. And when they're putting down that manure, they're increasing soil organic matter, and that's going to help improve the soil sponge as well. So overall, adaptive grazing can really mitigate the effects of droughts and floods. And that is definitely something that we want to do here in Texas, since our weather can be so inclement and go back and forth between these two things and cause a lot of problems for ag producers. Overall, we want to use adaptive grazing as well because plants will stay vegetative a little longer in each season. So in the cooler season, you'll have live plants for a little bit longer throughout even when we have freezing. The way in which that plant diversity works, it can help keep the plants healthier for longer periods, which give your cattle more forage in the winter. And then the same thing happens in the summer because you have more diversity in the pasture and better soil health through different adaptive grazing practices. You've increased the soil sponge, and you can hold more water in the soil, which then is going to allow plants to last longer in that warm season as well. And again, we're creating habitat for wildlife, both above ground and below ground. So the benefits of adaptive grazing are many, and I want to talk a little bit about increasing carrying capacity and walk you through a little math here. So through adaptive grazing, you can oftentimes increase your forage in your pasture very easily. And it can take a little time to move into an adaptive grazing system and then for the land to get into a flow with that type of grazing system. But overall, each year you're going to, with good conditions, increase the amount of forage that you're growing in your pastures. So if you can grow 1 ounce more of forage per square yard in your pasture, this can be a really great benefit to increasing carrying capacity, increasing profitability of cattle. So your average 1,200 pound cow eats about 30 pounds of forage per day. And if you times that times 365 days a year, you're gonna get an around 11,000 pounds per year of forage that cow is eating. Now, if you grow 1 more ounce per square yard of forage, you can increase your forage, and you divide, that equals 302 pounds. So if you divide 11,000 pounds by 302 pounds, you get a 36. So at 36 acres, per 36 acres, you can increase your herd by 1 more cow. So basically, let's round that up to 40 acres just to make the math easy here. And if you divide 400 acres by 40, you get 10. So if you have 400 acres and you increase 1 more ounce of forage per square yard, you can increase your carrying capacity by 10. Now, when you take your gross margin and you subtract your overhead costs, which in general, there's very little overhead costs in adaptive grazing if you're just using your same system, and you divide, so you take your gross margin and you divide that by 40 acres, you're going to get $10 more in profit per acre. So depending on your herd, your acreage size, you can really increase your profitability. So on 1,000 acres, you can get $10,000 more per year through that growth of 1 more ounce of forage per square yard. If you want to watch this in detail, I have given a link at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. This is a ranching for profit video that was made, and the math is given in much more detail in that video for you to see the benefit of 1 more ounce per acre. So that is a little on adaptive grazing. I want to move on to soil testing, and soil testing is a great way to get to know your land. And I really suggest that everybody do soil testing on their land. We use a couple different soil tests. The Haney soil test, which looks at soil respiration and nutrient availability. We also look at the PLFA, which is going to look at soil microbiology and the ratios of bacteria to fungi in your soil. We also do a test called the available water holding capacity test. And that test is going to only be done maybe every 3 to 5 years, and it's going to look at how your soil sponge is changing and how you can hold more water in your soil. Soil tests can be really beneficial in the long run at saving money as well, particularly the Haney test, because if you have a hay field, for instance, and you want to know how much fertilizer you want to put on that, you can do a soil test that will tell you that. The Haney test tends to be a little bit more sensitive than some of the other tests on the market, and allows you and makes recommendations on how much fertilizer should be used. In general, the Haney test recommends less fertilizers and saves you money in the long run because of that. And that's just because the test is a little bit more sensitive at looking at water-soluble nutrients to the plant. The picture on the bottom left here is a picture of a colleague doing a soil infiltration test. And this is a very inexpensive way to do soil testing. And you can make a soil infiltration test out of a coffee can and look at how your soil infiltration, your water infiltration is changing over time on your land. And that's something that if you go online and you type into YouTube, you can see a lot of information on how to do that as well. But overall, we want to create healthy soil. The picture on the right is showing aggregates and around roots, and healthy soil aggregates are how water moves down into the soil and nutrients are exchanged. So doing soil tests so that you can learn where your soil stands and what you need to do to improve it is very beneficial. And 2 of the labs that we suggest are Ward Labs or the AgriLife Extension Lab through A&M. Colin?
All right. So if you're a livestock producer, a great option for improving land health that is economically sound is pasture cropping. In this strategy, you're planting cover crops, which are crops not grown for harvest, but are grown to rehabilitate land and to provide a protein-rich and nutrient-dense forage for your livestock. Cover crops can be done in monocrops or in diverse species mixes. Many of these cover crops fixate nitrogen, meaning that they take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and through associations with certain bacteria in the soil, release nitrogen into the soil for other grasses or the next crop. Many of these covers also mine nutrients such as phosphorus from the subsoil that the livestock can benefit from by consuming the covers. Some of these covers need special consideration, and I'm happy to help y'all navigate cover crop selection and planting strategies at a later date or in the questions afterwards. This slide is to show, I gotta move on. This slide is to show you all the cost of buying and planting 1 acre's worth of sun hemp, which is a cover crop, versus buying 1 acre of supreme alfalfa hay. There will be some flexibility because different covers produce different yields and nutrients, but this is just one example for y'all. If you look at yields, to buy an acre's worth of alfalfa hay, if it were planted out in the field, you'd have to buy 5 tons. And that is compared to the 1.5 to 5 tons of sun hemp that a planted acre produces. You know, this number varies because it depends on the time of year planted and the size you let it grow to. As you can see, protein has to be higher than 22% to be considered a supreme quality feed, and sun hemp meets that with a 25 to 30% protein content. Moving on, just down the list here, if y'all follow along with me, neutral detergent fiber is used to calculate how much food an animal can hold. There's a limit to how much food will fit into an animal at one time. For example, a cow will eat until the first chamber of the stomach, also called the rumen, is full. Once that chamber is full, the cow will no longer eat until the food moves to the gut or is digested. Each type of foraged food or fiber will take up different amounts of space and digest differently. The neutral detergent fiber provides information to the quality of the feed. Acid detergent fiber is used to calculate the energy that will be derived from feed that can be used by the animal. These calculations are very important in determining how much feed must be given to an animal. So the two fiber calculations are used in conjunction with one another to determine the amount and energy that will be contained in a feed. Fiber that is low in these materials will typically take up less space in the stomach and are able to provide larger amounts of energy to the animal. Fibers high in these materials take up more space and produce less energy for the animal to use. As you can see, sun hemp meets these numbers for supreme quality and can even be less than what is considered supreme feed hay. So for nitrogen fixation, if you're buying hay, you get none. But if you plant sun hemp or other leguminous cover crops, you can get nitrogen fixation, and sun hemp can provide up to 120 pounds of nitrogen in your soils per acre. Again, this number will vary if you plant something else. There's cover crops that don't fixate nitrogen, but it gives you the option to have an additional benefit to your land. It can help you restore native grasses if that's your goal. Lastly, cost. Based on the USDA hay report for Central Texas from this February, it would cost you $2,600 to buy 5 tons of alfalfa hay. To plant an acre of sun hemp and maybe get a similar yield, it would cost you about $65, and that includes some tractor time and additional supplies and materials. Now, you have to buy some planting equipment, but at that cost difference, your investment could be made up fairly quickly. There's other management strategies that go into planting pasture crops, and I'm happy to discuss any of those with y'all, including timing, season consideration, and things like that. So moving on, tree planting is a classic land and environmental improvement strategy, but these 3 techniques that I'm about to talk about put a twist on tree planting that can increase those improvements. The first is contour planting of strips of trees. This can be done in conjunction with that swale and berm system I discussed earlier, or not. These on-contour plantings will create a line of root mats, and if they are deciduous trees, they also create an area of higher organic matter from leaf drop. These contour plantings slow water and reduce water and wind erosion. Another option is for planting trees, say on a slope, is to create a fish scale berm, or fish scale micro berm, which you can see on that bottom left picture. Planting a hillside like this with a micro berm on the contour slows water and erosion and also provides an extra pulse of water to your trees. It's almost just like that similar swale and berm system I showed you all earlier. It's a kind of a more concentrated version of that. So the last kind of tree planting method is silvopasture, which is the intentional integration of livestock, planted forages, and trees, whether they be fruit, nut, shade, or timber trees. These forages, which are cover crops, which we discussed a little bit earlier, provide nutrient and protein-rich forages to the cows. They cover the soil, provide diverse plants, keep a live root, and cover the ground, and they provide nutrients to the trees that are planted from both the animal urine and manure and the cover crops. So this system creates an ability for you to sell tree products and livestock, which allows you to get multiple yields and diversify your income, creating a more resilient farm system. So moving on to our last management strategy, native seeding. Native seeding is a great solution for several scenarios. If your goal is to bring back native plants and your land has been degraded for a long time, there may be no native seeds left in your soil, or what we call the seed bank. If you've lost a lot of soil over the decades, these seeds likely went with it. For this, you may have to plant the native seeds to get a stand of native plants. So planting natives is also a great way to recover after large disturbances, such as overgrazing, burns, or brush removal. Things may be slow to come back, and if you put something in the ground that you want to grow, it's going to move along the process. Doing this will cover your soil and get some live roots in the ground. Native seeding is also a fantastic option for erosion prevention on slopes and around livestock tanks. Many natives are perennials and have much larger root systems than annual grasses and forbs. And these larger root systems hold the soil better than annual root systems. You can also use native seeding to limit weed species or invasive establishment, and also you can improve your plant diversity, structure, composition of your pastures and your land. So now I'm going to pass it off to Kara one last time to wrap it up, and we're going to take some questions, and she'll take us to the question and answer portion.
All right, get to the next slide here. Whoops. All right, so I just want to wrap up with a few of the resources that you can access. The ATRA publications, which Colin mentioned earlier, he talked about ATRA. This is a link to our website, which has all of our free publications, videos, tutorials, podcasts. We have over 500 publications on every type of ag operation you could imagine. So please access that and look at all the resources we have available. I mentioned the Soil for Water website, and our resources page has a lot of management guides. I also mentioned where to find the video for the impact of an ounce. You can watch the whole video there at that link. And then the Edwards Aquifer Authority and the City of San Antonio, who are collaborators on this, I have given you all their information too. And there's a lot of great resources on the Quivira Coalition. They are based out of New Mexico, and they have a lot of wonderful erosion control resources. So I just gave you the link to one of those that talks about some of those options that I showed you in that slide in more depth. We are available for questions and to be of assistance in whatever way we can. Both Colin and I have our contact information there on the left-hand side of the slide, and then you have Thomas with the Edwards Aquifer Authority and Susan with City of San Antonio. So we're very thankful that you joined us today, and we will be doing a webinar on May 14th, which is a Thursday, at this lunchtime hour as well on the 5 soil health principles. And please keep your eye out for other workshops that we will have coming up. Hopefully we can do them in person soon. In the summer, I'd like to do an erosion control workshop, so keep your eye out for that. And again, thank you. We will now take questions, and you can type them into the question box and we will answer them. Okay. Let's see. No questions coming in here? Well, I guess that concludes the end of the webinar. And again, thank you for joining us. We hope to have you join us again. Thank you very much from NCAT, the Edwards Aquifer Authority, and the City of San Antonio.